Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner radio show, Cal's Corner Online. It's just called Cal's Corner. My name is Cal Korf, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is the one and only Rob McConnell. Welcome back, folks. Folks, today's show is a bit sentimental, at least from my perspective. I can't believe that it's already been 1 year since we came back to the X-Zone Broadcast Network at Rob's invitation, and I accepted it, of course. He's been a longtime friend. And we broadcast about a year ago from the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East. And that's rather interesting because the previous time I had been doing the show for years was from Europe, and prior to that, the United States. So the fact that in the three different times that we've done the show over the what's been last couple of decades, I guess, would have been United States. Then I moved to Europe, was there 10 years. Then we did the show from the Middle East, and then, of course, from India. So it really shows that the world is truly a global place. It's a small world, even though it's large. You can't walk it in a day, so to speak. The point is, it's a global community, and I'm not quoting Hillary Clinton when I say that. And I'm just honored and just humbled that it's already been a year. We've covered a lot of subjects, and going forward for the second year, the show has been a success, at least based on the ratings and the reactions that I've gotten. And I really appreciate that. It's done better than I would have thought, because at the end of the day, I'm not interested in hearing what I have to say, but apparently enough people are. And again, I appreciate that, especially being a journalist and a media personality. When I say media personality, I mean in the news media. I don't mean in celebrity stuff, because I'm not into that. In fact, if you look at the way I dress, it's very obvious that I have no sense of fashion either. Okay, so on Cal's Corner here, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. This show is not going to be an exception to that. But what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes and recap briefly some of what we've been able to do over the last year. And I want to point to some of these shows that I think are important, because I think they present facts anybody can independently verify. And that's probably the greatest attribute or aspect of facts, is the fact that you can verify them yourselves. They stand alone. They are inviolate. They don't care about people's opinions. And as the old saying goes, a person can have a right to their opinions, but they don't have the right to their own facts. So when I hear things like alternative facts, I have to shake my head, because there's no such thing. But the current White House administration talks about alternative facts and a bunch of other stuff that often isn't true. And we're boldly going as a nation, the United States, where no nation has gone before, as we continue this stupid, politically correct vernacular, to the point where it's even contaminated the White House beyond the ridiculous levels that it had polluted the Obama administration, where people walked back their remarks even though they never took them out for a walk in the first place. It's a ridiculous phrase. All right, so what are we going to talk about in recapping? Well, I don't have the list in front of me, I admit that, of every show we've ever done, but what I do remember is this. I remember when we launched, I was in the Middle East, in the small country of the United Arab Emirates. And other than Israel, it's probably the only sane country in that region. The reason it's sane is because it's very much westernized. Although it's an Islamic country, it does cut foreigners especially, and even some of its citizens, a lot of breath or slack, if you will, regarding what they can do and can't do. For example, I had alcohol while I was there, enjoyed some nice red Merlot wines. And because I had been coming from India, where it's a 7-year prison sentence if you dare to eat beef from a hamburger, go figure, I went to Burger King. I think it was the first place I went. Yeah, I think after KFC had gone there, because in India, ordinary KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, is banned. It's not there. Instead, it's only the spicy stuff, which I don't like, because Indians, especially Punjabis, love spices. In fact, they like to oversaturate their food with spices to the point where you can't taste the individual ingredients, which in my opinion, which I have a right to, destroys the whole concept of Indian food. Indian food is world famous for having many multiple spices and herbs, and each of which complement each other. They don't dominate each other, but the Punjabis have never understood that concept, and of course I lived in Punjab. So it was nice eating a double Whopper with cheese, no onions, because that's the way I like it, in Abu Dhabi, and not having to worry about the police or going to prison. Now, I admit I couldn't find pork easily, but I don't really eat pork, so it didn't bother me. But what impressed me about Abu Dhabi was that it was immaculate, clean, state-of-the-art, beautiful modern buildings, and I prefer older medieval buildings from the Middle Ages in Europe. That's my favorite era of architecture, the Baroque architecture and so on. Not really into modern stuff, even though I love Star Trek and science fiction. But Abu Dhabi, or Dubai especially, when you go there, it's like going to the future. It's like, no wonder they film movies like Star Trek and Star Wars there, because they don't have to build a lot of sets. It looks like a futuristic city. And of course, they're very state-of-the-art there. Other things I remember very vividly is when you see the police there, and they're very nice people. They're driving in Lamborghinis and other sports cars. The reason they're doing that is because they have to. They have to chase princes and other rich types who have their Lamborghinis. And, of course, normal police cars can't catch them. So the Abu Dhabi and Dubai police have a fleet of some of the fastest cars on the planet, so they can chase and catch some of the fastest speeders and lawbreakers on the planet. The nation itself is very safe. In fact, it's a law and order society because basically it's run by a dictatorship, let's be honest. I remember, for example, I actually was interviewing with a newspaper there. I was considering leaving a newspaper and joining this one in the Middle East. I would have been the only Jew there, which was rather ironic, I thought. And they made it very clear that my boss, as in the owner of the company, would be a member of the royal family. And I was talking to the HR manager who was from Syria there, a guy who turned out not to be honest, I'll be blunt with you. And it was made very clear that you have no recourse if you disagree with the big ruler over there. And I just was uncomfortable with that dynamic, so I'm glad that we decided to agree to disagree, and I wouldn't work there. And instead, I stayed at a newspaper that I love and helped found as one of a small team who did it, Daily World, and I'm still there today. And I have great relationships with my friends in India, and I'm honored to say that they're friends for life. And that's something that having lived in or been to 27 countries so far in my young life, I love traveling. I love other cultures. I'm honored to say that I have friends literally everywhere in the world. I even have a couple people I know who are down in Antarctica. So again, it just is a humble reminder that despite the size of our planet and the thousands of miles between the countries and the cultures and the people and the friends, we are all, again, one species, and it is a global community. And thanks to online technologies, where about half the planet is now online, it is getting even smaller, more integrated. And that, of course, raises entirely new challenges. People can't operate in a vacuum anymore. They have to pay attention to global issues, not in every subject literally, but certainly more so than not. And going forward, it's going to be even more the case. Now, of some of the shows that we did, I was working on a movie called The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy. And I want to give you an update on that because we talked about it on the radio show here. The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy is still in production, but it has been halted and is being changed. And let me explain why. The reason has to do with trying to streamline and harmonize and optimize, in the spirit of what I was just talking about, the global larger picture, what's been going on. I have no objection to a movie. In fact, one of the reasons that I was interested in doing this movie is because it wasn't going to be just another dry documentary. I was also interested and driven mostly by the fact that it would solve the Hill case, which is still being pushed as if it's real, even though there's no credible evidence that it is. And I am the only individual on this planet who has the original files from the 1970s, the smoking guns, if you will, in a figurative sense, that proves that the Hill case is not everything that its promoters have shown that it is or claim that it is. In fact, what they're saying is incorrect, and also at times falsehoods, let's be honest. So I had an interest in doing this movie, came up with a nice plot that everyone who was told what that plot was said they loved it, they would pay money to see it, even if they weren't interested in UFOs, which was something that I wanted to achieve in putting the script together. I worked on it for many, many months, got a lot of pre-production and special effects shots done. And then what happened is I had this opportunity, as you know, recently to be one of the two producers, along with Rob McConnell, of a new investigative journalism series called X-Zone Investigates. Now I had a problem. How do I do that and one or two other production things that I'm in the middle of? There's only so many hours in a day, even if the day were 40 hours long, and it's not, of course, it's 24. I couldn't do all of that. So rather than kill one project, I've decided to harmonize it. So what's being done with the movie now is, because I'm also doing a series, I want to harmonize them. I play myself, for lack of a better term, in all of these productions. I'm Cal Korff, that's it. So take it or leave it. So what I've done and what is going on now is we are looking at redoing the movie and changing it into a series that is ongoing. That involves, of course, more full character development than what existed in the movie. We had already filmed in Abu Dhabi, England, Prague. We had filmed in India. We'd filmed in the United States. We've been filming all over. And that's been going on for the last several months, and it's been just fantastic doing that. So what we're going to do is harmonize these two productions. They're going to both be TV series, and that's why the movie is not out yet and why I've been talking about the series instead, because it has morphed into that. So after we get back from this commercial break, I'll continue to talk about this, and then we'll cut to the main feature story of this episode of Cal's Corner. We'll be back after this break.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. free video on demand, live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Cal's Korner radio show. My name is Cal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. Now, as I was saying, excuse me, in the first segment, the movie The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy has not been canceled. It is not dead. It is very much in the works, and instead it is being transformed into being a TV series. That's even bigger than a movie, in my opinion. When you change something from what would have been a 2.5 hour project, which is what the Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy originally was, the original version of the movie was about 2.5 hours long. Then there was a special unedited edition and a director's cut, which made the total material about 3.5 hours. This would appeal, hopefully, to especially UFO enthusiasts. Most of the public doesn't care about UFO minutia, if you will, but ufologists do, and that's okay. That was the original plan, but now that you have a series, you have to flesh a lot of that out. But you have to walk a very fine line so that you don't just do it gratuitously. In other words, you have a character. There must be a reason for that character's existence, the usual who, what, where, why, when, how, why that person exists, and so on. And then, of course, you have to hire other people to do it, additional people. And sometimes you have people who are fine for the movie, but they're not going to be fine for the series. Maybe they don't have the time, or they don't live in the right area, or whatever. It depends on where you're filming. So you have to factor in all of this stuff, and being as you're the director and the executive producer of this and the writer of it, and you're in it, you're involved in all aspects of it. Even I've even been composing some music for it along with another gentleman in Serbia. And again, that's another example of this global effort behind this project. It just shows that, again, this can't be done overnight. So I didn't say anything about what had happened. What I started talking about instead is the upcoming series, X Zone Investigates, and then what I was going to do as it gets closer to airing its first episodes, which will be soon, I promise you. We've been very busy working on that. Then I would talk about this and explain what had happened. So I'm using this show to do that, and I want to explain how the two are harmonized. Now, in the upcoming show, X Zone Investigates, as I mentioned already, and I'm going to emphasize it again, this series is not a normal, conventional TV series, okay? It has an objective that every episode must solve the mystery it's talking about. It must solve it in a way that anybody, regardless of their belief, even if they don't believe the explanation going into it, will hopefully believe it by the end of the show. I realize there are people who are always going to deny whatever. That's their right. As long as they don't hurt people, it's okay. Just like, as I mentioned before, there was a survey done of a lot of millennials, and over 20% of them weren't sure, quote unquote, the Earth is round, even though they use Google Earth on their smartphones. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how somebody could be that stupid and naive, especially in today's world, but that's what they believe. They're not sure the Earth is round, and God knows why that is the case. It could be everything from lousy teachers to the fact that things just don't function properly in the brain. Who knows? But when you have that kind of mentality, if you will, what I wanted was to be able to present such a compelling case on each of these subjects covered in the X Zone Investigate series that we can literally point to the episode and say, blah, 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 and we've proven it, okay? In other words, I wasn't going to be interested in just doing another talking head documentary, been there, done that, don't find them interesting, where it's just my opinion, then you've got somebody with another opinion, and then you pick and choose your reality or your facts. No, I believe that facts are facts. Again, you have no right to reject them. I'm speaking to people in general. But you have to at least hopefully listen to them, and if you are able to verify things, you can then get in line with those facts. That's always a good idea, to get in line with reality. So what I've done is I've committed to doing a minimum of 6 episodes. We'll see how the show does after the first 6. Then we'll make any adjustments we need to make as we go along. That's only fitting, because there are times where you take your best shot, you take your best guess, you get it out there, and all of a sudden the public comes back with something you didn't even think of. And if it's valuable and it's worthy, you deal with it in follow-up productions if you have the luxury of doing them, and of course we will. So in the case of the upcoming X Zone Investigates, it is fact-based, absolutely. I promise you it is. And it contains information in there that no matter what you believe, you can independently verify it and prove exactly what we're saying. Now the challenge becomes, how do you present it to the people in a way that is interesting, entertaining, visually compelling, tells a complete story that really stands out from the rest of the competition? Because in my opinion, there's too much paranormal programming. It's all over the map. And I remain personally disappointed in major networks that I've worked with before who have essentially sold out their morality and credibility. I'll give you a couple examples here. Take the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, even National Geographic. I've worked with all of them. I've been in some of their productions. Years ago, you couldn't get the Discovery Channel or the History Channel or any Science Channel or even National Geographic to take the subject of Bigfoot seriously. They wouldn't. And who could blame them? There's no reason to do that. The evidence for Bigfoot has not risen high enough to say you're worthy of being taken seriously. You're credible. No, it's the evidence for Bigfoot is just as strong as the evidence for unicorns, and that's a fact. So, was it the fault of these networks not to go there? No, it wasn't. They were right to do it. But then what happened was there was a new generation born of people who casually mix science and pseudoscience. It could be, therefore it is, type of logic appeals to these people. And so you saw the networks, to widen their audience, to make more money, to sell more advertising. They sold out. Now all of a sudden you've got series on the air where they're hunting ghosts. And 3 or 4 years into that series, they still haven't found anything. Well, why? Because it's not true, folks. But they won't admit that. The search for Bigfoot, the hunt for Bigfoot, goes on for a year. You can place a bet in Vegas if you find a bookie that's stupid enough to take the bet that they'll never find anything because it isn't real. It does not exist. The history of how Bigfoot came into being, the legend, the myth, the loose adaptation from the myths of the Native American Indians, that's all very well-known stuff. There's no mystery there. And more importantly, there's no science to indicate Bigfoot even exists or has ever existed. But yet they'll go out there and look for Bigfoot. They'll spend millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands on episodes, number of them, putting in talking heads, a lot of famous people who work the airwaves, the talk circuit. And at the end of the day, nothing is produced. Sorry, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in something versus nothing. That's just me. So I promise you on the X Zone Investigate series, we're going to take no prisoners, and we are going to go ahead and call a spade, so to speak, and we're going to be very blunt, very truthful, and provide you with data, hopefully around an entertaining story, where anybody can get in there and go check it and prove that it is the truth. That, to me, is what is interesting about this series. I would watch it even if somebody else had done it. It's not I'm interested in it because I'm doing it with Rob. No, I'm interested in it because of the principles behind it. And this is where the movie The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy comes in. The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy, again, will be a series. How many episodes it goes, though, I can't tell you ahead of time because the storylines, which have to be thought out way ahead of time, trust me, they do. I'm writing them. I haven't gotten that far yet. And I have to walk a fine line between addressing some of the Hill stuff in the X Zone Investigates series, since I play myself, versus in another series where I'm also myself, and this case comes up. I'll figure it out. There will be references to it in the beginning. I just want to promise you and explain again why it is that things are taking their time, why it is that this is being done, what had happened, I'm being honest, upfront, and transparent with you. And of course, I expect to be held accountable one way or another for whatever it is we end up eventually broadcasting. So that's an update of where the two shows are, the two series now. Again, the Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy movie has been canceled from being a movie. I could always do it, pick up that ball again if I decide to change my mind. But at this point, I think I'm going to try to make it a series. I think it can go a couple of years. That's my best guess. And, of course, it does solve the Hill case, but it talks about a lot of other stuff, too. And in the X-Zone Investigate series, we will talk about the Hill case, but usually defer to the other series if you want the minutia. We'll get to it. Right now, of the 6 episodes that we are going to cover in the upcoming X-Zone Investigates to start this off, the Hill case is not on that list, at least as of this broadcast. All right, so now you have an update on where those projects are. Now, other episodes we had talked about the release of thousands of additional files on Kennedy's assassination. This is John F. Kennedy's assassination of November 22nd, 1963. I had said for years now, because I solved that assassination, was featured on Larry King on CNN Live on November 22nd, 1993, where I debated the former chief investigator for the House Select Committee on Assassinations. His name was Gaten Fonzie. Debated him. You can watch the tape. Kicked his butt. Not a single person called in to talk to him. They all wanted to talk to me, even though I was arguing the least popular hypothesis, which was that it was only Oswald. Most people didn't want to hear that, especially after Oliver Stone's ridiculous movie JFK, which set me off and made me determined to go on the media and try to set the record straight. Since I had done a 16-year study on Kennedy's murder and had proven that it was basically Oswald and had solved some things that the Warren Commission was not unable to prove, which of course left them open to deserved criticism. Another show we talked about was exposing the false claims of Al Gore and Hillary Clinton. And we'll come back to them and a few other subjects after this commercial break.
Broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond. You're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Korner radio show. My name is Cal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. Now, other subjects we've talked about on the show have been international politics. We've talked about Donald Trump. We've talked about Russia. We've talked about communist China. We've talked about communist North Korea. We've talked about India, Pakistan, the Middle East, Israel, etc. We've talked about Iran. We talk about whatever I think is logical to talk about, usually the current international subject of the day. So in this spirit, what I'd like to talk about for the rest of the show as we wrap this up is a development which should concern all human beings if they care about their fellow human beings. Unfortunately, I'll be very blunt about this issue, hardly anybody cares. And this is a repeat of a disgraceful, disgusting pattern that we saw in the 1930s as Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler rose to power, and the Nazis were building concentration camps. Dachau was the first functional one. Dachau's existence, it was opened in, I believe, 1936. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't top secret. It was an open fact, and it was created to lock up opponents of Hitler and, of course, political prisoners. It later became sometimes used as an extermination camp. It also they also put homosexuals in there. I've been to Dachau several times. I would encourage anybody listening to this to also do the same thing. It's located maybe about 12 kilometers. It's not that far outside the city of Munich. It's easy to get to. Just follow the signs and spend at least a day there because it will take you a day. And just to see this sheer barbarity of what happened in the remains of that camp, I think people need to see that so that they can understand appreciate the tragedy of genocide that had been committed at places like that and what the Nazi regime stood for. And now, in the new century here, we segue all these decades later to communist China, which of course is aping the Nazis in how they abuse and mistreat their citizens. So I want you to know that in last Sunday's issue, a few days ago, in Daily World newspaper, I was honored to have another full-page special, around 2,500 words roughly, where I wrote about the Nazi concentration camps. It was an article, a full-page special called Communist China's Nazi-like Concentration Camps. And as I noted, that in the Xinjiang province of China, which is about half the size of India, as many as 2 million people, now these would be Uyghurs and other minorities, they're all being held captive in a bunch of concentration camps, or what the communists and Nazis used to call re-education centers, similar to those of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. Now, I know that the term concentration camp, people have criticized me for using that to describe these camps, but they are, and let me prove it. Because the term concentration camp, according to the authoritative American Oxford English Dictionary, and you can look it up, it means the following, and this is a quote from it: "It's a place where large numbers of people, especially political prisoners, or members of persecuted minorities," now these would include Muslims in China's case, or maybe even homosexuals, "are deliberately imprisoned in a relatively small area with inadequate facilities, sometimes to provide forced labor, or to await mass execution." The term is most strongly associated with the several hundred camps established by the Nazis in Germany and occupied Europe in 1933 to 1945, among the most infamous being Dachau, Belsen, and Auschwitz. Now, Auschwitz, for those who know history, was a bit of a different animal than, say, Dachau. Auschwitz was a one-way ticket for sure. It was an extermination camp. You went there to be killed, essentially. They had a couple of units there. One was strictly dedicated to exterminations. Now, I will tell you that democracies do not build concentration camps. No human being nor any freedom-loving nation should or would ever welcome their existence, let alone their actual use. Countries who build and use them must be held accountable, regardless of who and how powerful they are. China is no exception to this. There is a global mechanism to do this, that is, hold countries like China and North Korea who have concentration camps accountable. It has long been in place to hold the guilty who commit crimes against humanity accountable and bring them to justice. What is lacking, however, is the will of the international community and its politicians and citizens to do this. Now, there can be no exceptions to this rule, no exceptions to the principle of universal morality. No country should be allowed to commit genocide, to restrict or imprison individuals just because they desire genuine freedom and democracy, the right to self-determination, or because they belong to a certain ethnic or religious group. The color of one's skin is caused by genetics. Any other claim is racism. Now, on August 10th, 2018, so this was recently, in Geneva, Switzerland, the United Nations Human Rights Panel officially condemned Communist China for creating what it called, quote, a massive internment camp that is shrouded in secrecy, unquote. According to the UN, as many as 2 million people are being held prisoner in these camps. Now, this is no exaggeration. The official operation to attack ethnic and religious groups who, such as the Uyghurs, sometimes people call them the Uyghurs, they're a Muslim minority. This was set into motion over 2 years ago by China's newly minted dictator, Xi Jinping, when he ordered his battle-tested henchman, Chen Guangguo, to oversee the Xinjiang region and execute a pogrom-like campaigns to subdue everyone. Now, Guangguo had previously carried out cleansing campaigns against Tibetans seeking independence from China. Guangguo is Jinping's Chinese equivalent to Nazi Reinhold Heydrich. He serves in essentially the same brutal and ruthless capacity as Heydrich did to Adolf Hitler. Now, let's talk about Hitler and China's current dictator for life, Xi Jinping. I admit that one should be always very wary and careful of invoking images of Nazi Germany and comparing anyone's behavior to that of former Nazi genocidal dictator Adolf Hitler. Where it concerns what China is doing, however, this analogy fits actual events from history, and it is arguably relevant. Let's briefly prove it. After Hitler and the Nazis were at first given parts of land and then quickly conquered the rest of the country of Czechoslovakia, today it's called the Czech Republic, Hitler dissolved its existence as a nation and declared it to be a protectorate of the Reich instead. Heydrich was put in charge as its provincial governor. Now, Heydrich also answered to his immediate boss, the infamous Heinrich Himmler, who was the leader of the dreaded SS, which was Hitler's private army that also oversaw concentration and extermination camps. So in the same way that Heydrich ruthlessly ruled over the former Czechoslovakia, and having lived in the Czech Republic for 10 years, I heard a lot of stories from people who were there at the time, especially, of course, they're elderly now. And Czechoslovakia back then was a much smaller geographic region than the Chinese province of Xinjiang is. We have to keep that in mind. Even Guangguo's methods that Jinping gives him permission to deploy or carry out are the same. They include mass arrests. The difference is they use modern technology. For example, when the Nazis and other communist governments rule over an area, they always hunt down and round up individuals and destroy entities whom they feel constitute, quote, an existential threat, unquote, or might engage in, quote, acts of terrorism, unquote. I mean, let's be honest, ever since the terrorist attacks of 9/11 against the USA by Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, China, like several other nations, Russia being another example, have used the threat of so-called terrorism or the war against terrorism as an excuse to clamp down on their opponents. In the province of Xinjiang over the past 2 years, the Chinese have spent over $5 billion installing surveillance equipment to spy on everybody in this region. Literally, every individual who lives in this province has not only been fingerprinted, photographed, their image has been scanned into a facial recognition database, and even DNA samples have been collected from everybody. Literally everyone. Now, typical of both the Nazis and the Communist Chinese, young males especially have been rounded up and deported, forced to leave their families, wives, and even children. When individual members of families are not arrested and deported to relocation camps to be, quote, re-educated, unquote, and brainwashed to renounce one's culture and even religion, forced to swear instead blind obedience and servitude to the Communist Party and its dictator leader, even though the people in this region will always remain discriminated against, even if they do all the stuff the Communist Party asks them to. This is the same way that the Nazis abused and even murdered non-Aryan races because they were, quote, racially inferior. Again, China's doing the same thing, folks, but nobody seems to care. So in addition to the use of torture, Muslims and other religious groups are being forced to throw away their religious texts, eat foods that are culturally and religiously forbidden for them to do so, live a lifestyle that not only fundamentally changes them, it destroys who and what they are completely, and instead produces a compliant and broken citizen, a zombie, if you will, who will serve only the state and question nothing. What China is also doing is running not only the world's largest group of concentration camps, both the Nazis and the communists hate organized religion. This includes everything from Buddhism to Christianity to Judaism to Islam. Now, the reasons the Nazis and communists hate religion is because religion is a competing intellectual and spiritual ideology. If you're busy doing God's will, quote unquote, you're likely not carrying out the orders of the Communist Party. And we'll be back after this commercial break to wrap this up in segment 4.
Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner radio show. Cal's Corner Online, as it's sometimes called. It's just Cal's Corner. My name is Cal Corfin. I'm your host, of course, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, as I was saying, competing doctrines that go against the twisted, sick, and hate-driven ideologies of the Nazis and communists, they're viewed as a threat, which is why China has now forbidden children from attending Christian churches. That's right. If you are a Christian family in communist China and you have a child, they are no longer allowed to attend church. Instead, all youths must now attend functions held by the Communist Party, while adults will, for now, be allowed to continue to conduct activities in their officially approved religious establishments, but doing this, meaning attending church, will get you blacklisted by the Communist Party as being essentially an enemy of the people, quote unquote. Now, remember, again, to use an accurate historical analogy, the Hitler Youth. German kids and even minorities from captured lands were sent to Germany to join the Hitler Youth and serve in it. Their loyalty, of course, being switched from Jesus Christ and Christian values, as an example, to Hitler and Nazi hate-driven racist ideology. Now, nationwide across China, while mass arrests have spiked during the past few years, they are off the charts in the province of Xinjiang, where their numbers are 7 times higher than the country's statistical average. Now, this is not a coincidence. People don't arrest themselves. Instead, they get arrested. So these mass arrests are increasing the persecutions of the innocent. They are official communist Chinese policy. These events didn't create or drive themselves. They were ordered by the Communist Party, and they're ruthlessly carried out by its dictator. In Christian churches and other religious entities, for example, symbols such as crosses are no longer allowed to be displayed on the tops of buildings, nor in prominent places that are visible to the public. On private property, even inside Christian churches and buildings, images and portraits of Jesus Christ are being removed, replaced instead by officially approved posters of communist dictator Xi Jinping. Once again, this is exactly what Hitler and the Nazis did, what Joseph Stalin and the communist former Soviet Union always did. Now let's talk about the prison camps. Now, thanks to satellite imagery, one can now easily Google photos of China's massive numbers of internment camps where some 2 million people are now being held prisoner. They're being tortured, they're enslaved, they're being re-educated. Their buildings, you can look at these images, just bother to search on the internet if you're listening to the show. They resemble the large barrack-style types of structures the Nazis built and used at concentration camps such as Dachau, which again was the first one that was put into service in Nazi Germany. As I've said, I've been to Dachau several times. I would encourage every human being to do it, as well as visit the extermination camp in Auschwitz in Poland. If you do anything when you go to Europe, please visit those two sites, even if you don't care about history. If you aren't moved to tears, I'm sorry, you have no heart, you have no soul as far as I'm concerned. Now, where Dachau held as many as 40 to 60,000 prisoners at one time, depending on the circumstances and what year of his existence. Again, China's massive internment camp networks in the Xinjiang province hold as many as 2 million people. And we must remember that the sheer geographic size of this province is enormous. It's about half the size of the country of India. And India itself, the whole country, is about the size of the entire European Union. Now, I can relate to that because when I moved from living in the European Union and I was able to visit a couple of countries in a day, they're a couple hours apart from each other depending on where you go and what kind of transport you use. When I moved to India, it was a bit more of a pain to get around because I'd have to go 900 kilometers in one direction, sometimes to go meet people or do some things. In Europe, if I went 900 kilometers, I'd practically be out of the continent. So, again, imagine a area full of concentration camps where 2 million people are locked up. They're fingerprinted, ID, DNA samples taken. There's facial recognition technology used on them. They are essentially prisoners of the state, confined in an area that's half the size of the European Union or India. That's, again, enormous. So the question now becomes, what is the global community going to do? Well, if the global community does not unite against China now, today, as so to speak, meaning nowadays, and hold it accountable for the escalating numerous crimes that it is committing against humanity, this means that for all of us who currently exist and for future generations, that if communist China is not stopped now, it will reach a point where it will be impossible to ever hold them accountable. It will be too late. And when considering the scale of what China is currently doing, which is essentially holding millions of people prisoner, imagine what more damage they can do 5 years from now when they are even more powerful, have even more deadly and efficient military weapons and technology. They have more economic clout. They've armed more of the South China Sea. And as China also moves to conquer the island nation of Taiwan, Communist China has always said that it will use military force, if necessary, to reunite, quote unquote, with Taiwan is necessary. Now, I remind everybody that as history has proven, and unfortunately history is not a favorite subject of most people, and I find that inexcusable. I just cannot relate to the mentality of, I'm not interested in knowing what happened in the past. Oh my God, that is so warped. Anyway, as history has proven, when tyranny is appeased and rewarded, democracy not only dies, so do the innocent and those who just can't be bothered to try to do something to fight against or stop tyranny, to lay the foundations for future generations, so that going forward, the mindsets, ideologies, and social conditions that help fuel the rise of Nazism or communism can never happen again. Unfortunately, sadly, tragically, inexcusably, nothing like this is even being close to being attempted. Today, among so-called millennials, especially in the West, nearly 25% of them are now crying out for socialism, democratic socialism, and even communism. Now, to these types, I argue that they're arguably either ignorant or they don't understand even basic history. Other surveys of millennials indicate, again, as I've said, that some 22% aren't sure the Earth is even round. So no wonder most of the globe doesn't really care about what China is doing with its internment camps, and that's exactly the way Communist China wants it. A lot of people suffer from the, I think, condition that can be deadly that says, if I don't see how it affects me, I don't care. My God, that is not the way to live your life, because your life is not lived in a vacuum. You need other people. Well, now we get to the political process of how to handle this, the so-called UN Security Council, which is an oxymoron if there ever was a term. Now, presently, the gravest problem that the UN Security Council faces is that its modus operandi is provably outdated, and it is increasingly today essentially useless. Now, ideally, the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, should hold an emergency meeting to discuss the issue of China and what it has been doing. It won't do this, however, to any credible degree, because China is a permanent member of the UNSC, and it would just veto any motions or resolutions it doesn't like. Now, this dynamic we've seen before. Russia vetoes motions to punish it for what's going on in Syria or to punish Syria. China will veto motions, and Russia will on occasion, to hold North Korea accountable. So to be clear, the UNSC essentially works when its permanent members agree on issues and what actions to take. It fails when they don't do this, and when a single member can veto any resolution or plans to act it. To use an analogy, when you have the foxes guarding the hen house, of course the hens are going to start disappearing. So we've seen corruption at the UN Security Council before. I've documented as a journalist where Saddam Hussein had paid millions of dollars in bribes and black market oil to Russia, France, to China to go ahead and buy their votes to sabotage what Bush was trying to do years ago. We're talking George W. Bush, to try to get rid of Saddam Hussein. Well, the reason France and those other countries were against it was because they were being paid, bribed by Saddam to go against the U.S. The spreadsheets proving those payments were found in Iraqi intelligence headquarters in Baghdad after Saddam skirted out of the country and fled for his life, only to be captured later, then tried, and then executed as he should have been. So let's talk about the concept of never again, because it is probably one of the most important concepts in history. When the global community learned and saw in the aftermath of the ashes of World War II, and especially the Holocaust, which with its concentration and death camps where 6 million Jews were exterminated by the Nazis, the words never again were forever etched into our consciousness, our morality, and theoretically our soul. Now, if we honor these two words and keep our promise to defend their meaning, which is an act of morality and spirit that ultimately defines our soul, the communist Chinese will not be able to get away with their crimes the way they have done so largely with abandon over the decades. For when the free world accepts tyranny over freedom, there can be no democracy. Now, it has long been said that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. This has always been true. Yet eternal vigilance is not just looking out for or acting against a direct threat to one's country. Instead, eternal vigilance must be global, which is why in the past 2 world wars were fought, where freedom and democracy ultimately prevailed. But they ultimately prevailed, folks, because people finally bothered to do something to stop tyranny, to stop Nazism, to stop totalitarianism. When they didn't bother, Hitler had his way, and that is a fact. So we need to think about this. We need to take action against communist China. We have to stop them now before it's impossible to stop them. And if one day, God forbid, we reach the point where they can't be stopped, you can blame the people who just were too busy to be bothered. We'll be back next week.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com, or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.